Hello Pokemon trainers, welcome back to another Pokemon Scarlet and Violet Battle Stadium Singles video here on iStarLeague TV. So today I'm going to make a quick video here, hopefully it'll be quick, but I wanted to talk about basically the state of the meta for Battle Stadium Singles as of Regulation G's, onset, I don't know. This is the first full month, we are just about done with the first full month of the Regulation G rule set in Scarlet and Violet for Battle Stadium Singles, and of course that includes all of the restricted legendary Pokemon that are now usable in Battle Stadium. So we get to kind of see what the meta looks like, what has changed from previous metas and stuff, and I'm kind of framing this video as you can see by the title, the winners and losers of this patch. So basically the winners are Pokemon that are doing really well in this meta, and then of course the losers are the Pokemon that are maybe not doing really well in this meta. And a big frame of reference is previous seasons. So the last season, how things were looking, we compare that to this season and see which Pokemon have kind of fallen and which Pokemon have risen. Let's start by talking about kind of the losers of this meta. By the way, I'm using this website. This is Pikalytics, which is a great website for kind of checking the statistics for, Pokemon and Battle Stadium in general. If you click right there at the drop-down screen, you can kind of choose which rule set. Of course, we are on Battle Stadium Singles. I'm assuming that isn't a typo. It should say Regulation G, not Regulation F. And I'm assuming this is correct. This is Regulation G because it does show all the restricteds. So that should say Regulation G. But of course, if you do play VGC as well, or even OU or other formats, you can check the statistics for all of them. So it's a really useful website. I will definitely post a link to it in the description so you can check it out. But it shows all of the Pokemon in order of their usage. This is information you can also find in Pokemon Home, the app, so that's also useful. And then you can click on the Pokemon, obviously, and it'll tell you all their stats, all the items they hold, common Terra types, common moves, etc. So let's get right to it. So let's start with the losers, kind of. That's kind of a harsh word, but really I wanted to highlight a few Pokemon that were at the top of their game in previous seasons, not just last season, but also in other seasons as well, that are not doing quite as well in the current meta. Of course, a big reason why these Pokemon are probably not doing as well is the restricted legends. The restricted legends are pretty much the defining Pokemon of this meta, unsurprisingly, and there are some really, really, really powerful ones, so that allows certain Pokemon to kind of rise to the top because they can handle them, or Pokemon fall off or drop down because they maybe can't handle them quite so well. So the first one I want to talk about that's kind of the most notable is Dragonite. Dragonite has long been just one of the best Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles for the entire Scarlet and Violet duration. And for good reason. I mean, Multi-Scale is an amazing ability. It's got great stats. It has a lot of versatility with its Terra type and the moves that it can run and the EV spreads and everything. It just could do so many different things. But with the onset of Regulation G and all of these extremely powerful Pokemon that can keep up with Dragonite, Dragonite has plummeted in usage. It is still in the top 10, which is worth noting, but it has fallen from I think it would be consistently top 3 for a lot of seasons, sometimes number 1, to now the number 8 most used Pokemon. This is the lowest Dragonite has been in a long, long time, maybe ever in Scarlet and Violet. But yeah, I mean, Dragonite clearly is still very good. And of course, this is just the first month of this meta, so it's very possible in the future that Dragonite continues to fall even further. It might fall out of the top 10. It still is a great Pokemon though, and it still does everything that I said, which is it's very versatile and it can run different Terra types, different movesets, all of that. So you can still kind of fit it on a lot of different types of teams, and it still hits very hard. But Koraidon, if you want to look for a really strong dragon type, Koraidon is right there. Koraidon is extremely powerful, and Dragonite is actually okay at dealing with Koraidon, but you need to get some damage on it first. Of course, the other restricted legend in this case is Calyrex, and one of your best ways to hit Calyrex is with Extreme Speed, which of course it's immune to. So yeah, Dragonite sadly has fallen. Another big drop is Urshifu Rapid Strike, which was yet another Pokemon that was consistently in the top 10, top 5 even, and I think often in the top 3 for a lot of seasons that it was legal. And now it is not even in the top 10. It's almost like an afterthought. It's still a solid Pokemon once again. It is still capable of doing a lot of damage, but I think it's its typing is a liability offensively and defensively in this meta. It can't really hang against Koraidon because, I mean, Koraidon's faster. You also don't really have a great move to hit Koraidon really hard, and Koraidon can just kind of obliterate you. And then, of course, against Calyrex, Calyrex is also faster than you, and Calyrex is a psychic type, but you also can't really survive an Astral Barrage, so yeah, there's just so much going against Urshifu at this point. Again, it is still a viable Pokemon, but I would not be surprised if it continues to drop even further. And the last Pokemon that I wanted to talk about here for the losers of this update of this Regulation G, you know, new format is Gholdengo. Gholdengo was yet another Pokemon that was in the top 10 very consistently, and it is barely in the top 30 right now. That's how much it's fallen. Sorry, just a couple quick, very, very quick honorable mentions or dishonorable mentions. You can see Scizor and Garganacl right there, number 28 and 29. Those are two other Pokemon that were pretty consistently up there for a long time that are now, you know, barely scraping the top 30. But going back to Gholdengo, once again, I mean, the two defining Pokemon in this meta, I mean, I guess there's three, right? Fluttermane, Calyrex, and Koraidon. All of those Pokemon just kind of destroy Gholdengo, and even though Gholdengo can Terrastalize to kind of take on one of those Pokemon, it can't handle all of them at once, right? So if you have like a Terra Normal type to take on the Ghost types, well then you're still weak to Koraidon's fighting type moves, right? If you don't Terrastalize, you're weak to so many moves from these Pokemon, and sadly Gholdengo just, it doesn't hit hard enough anymore, it's not fast enough, and it's not tanky enough for these extremely powerful Pokemon. It's still solid though, like I keep saying. Choice Scarf is its most used item, probably unsurprisingly. Just getting an edge on some of these Pokemon, being able to outspeed them can sometimes really help you out. But in all honesty, and very sadly, there are kind of just Pokemon that do what Gholdengo's trying to do just a little bit better at this point. So if you want something that's really strong, that's a good Ghost type, there's a lot of better options. And, you know, if you want something that's a little tricky, that can kind of use the move Trick and has a great ability, a good defensive ability, there are other Pokemon that are good at that as well. And I think this meta is just very fast-paced, unsurprisingly, because there's so many strong Pokemon. So Gholdengo just can't really afford to, like, keep up, I guess you could say. All right, let's talk about the winners of this new meta. And, you know, obviously, this is the first rule set that allows restricted legends in Scarlet and Violet, and so of course, you know, Koraidon's extremely powerful, Calyrex is extremely powerful, Miraidon is amazing, Kyogre and Ho-Oh and Zacian are also very good. So I don't know if I would count those as winners. I mean, I guess you could say Koraidon and Calyrex are winners because they're just extremely powerful. These are the two most powerful Pokemon in the entire meta, and they just are extremely scary. If you need to have an answer to them on your team. Sometimes you need to have more than one, and even sometimes the Pokemon that you're using to answer them still get destroyed by them, so it's terrifying, right? So obviously Koraidon's a winner, Calyrex is a winner, you know, you should be prepared for them and expect to see them a lot, but at least in comparison to older metas, I mean, clearly the number one winner is the Pokemon that was already the number one winner for a long time, and that is Fluttermane, as you can see right here. Fluttermane is, of course, still the number one most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium singles, and probably the most powerful still. I mean, it can contend with Koraidon and Calyrex really nicely because it has 4 times super effective moves against each of them. And it can go Terra, it has Choice Specs and Booster Energy, and even Focus Sash, all of which are really good items for it. And I mean, what more can we say about Fluttermane at this point? Before the meta started, I really expected Fluttermane to drop off, or I think I kind of hoped that it would, because it's a Pokemon that you see all the time and it's extremely powerful, but, you know, probably unsurprisingly, it has remained the number one Pokemon, and I think it's here to stay. I can't really see too many other Pokemon overthrowing it. You know, Koraidon is extremely powerful, but once again, so is Calyrex. I think basically the power level of these restricted legends is pretty close. So that's why Koraidon's not like the number one most used Pokemon, because, you know, you can only use one restricted on your team. And so, you know, if you play against 50 teams, you know, not all of them are going to have Koraidon because they can only have one restricted, right? Some of them might want to try Miraidon, some of them might want to try Calyrex, some of them might play Zacian, etc. And even some of the restricted that are not even up here are still really strong. Like I've played some Rayquaza, some Eternatus, some Kyurem Black, and those are still really good Pokemon that don't see quite as much play. So again, I don't think Koraidon will ever be the #1 most used Pokemon, even though it's extremely strong, because every team can play Flutter Mane. Every single team can play Flutter Mane, but not every team can play Koraidon, because if you're running, again, Miraidon or Calyrex or Kyogre, you cannot play Koraidon on your team anymore. So important to note. So Flutter Mane, is it a winner? It's holding its crown, and I unfortunately don't think anything's going to dethrone it for a while, if ever. The next big winner here is Ogerpon, though. Ogerpon was always in the top 10 since it was released, but it's now the second most used Pokemon, and more specifically, a big winner here is Wellspring Ogerpon, or the Water Ogerpon, which is the Ogerpon form. It did not really see quite as much play. I don't remember. I know for the longest time, or probably always, the Fire Ogerpon was the #1 most used Ogerpon in previous seasons. I don't remember if Water was #2 or 3. There was a point, I think, where it was definitely #3 to the Rock one, but either way, Water has risen up as the best Ogerpon variant. You can still use Fire or even Grass. They're still very, very good, but I think a big reason for this is because Water is just a great typing. It gives you a good answer to some of the common Pokemon in the meta, but also, I think most importantly, Water Ogerpon can get a special defense boost when you Terrastalize, and that really helps against Flutter Mane being the best Pokemon in the meta, good against Ursaluna, and also notably pretty good against Calyrex once you get that special defense boost. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. Fire is also not quite as good of a typing as it used to be. You know, Fire is really bad against Koraidon. I guess to be fair, Water is also really bad against Koraidon, but I guess if they go Terra Fire with Koraidon, you do have a super effective move against it. So either way, Ogerpon, you know, I was honestly surprised. I think this is the Pokemon that surprised me the most, the fact that Ogerpon is #2, and furthermore, the fact that it's Water Ogerpon that's the most used Ogerpon. And then finally, the other winner here, of course, is Chien-Pao. Chien-Pao is another Pokemon that has been very good, you know, and it's now #3. I think in previous seasons, it was very slowly creeping back up to the top 5, but it was still like #6, #7 in a lot of cases. And it was very slowly creeping back up. It is now #3, and for good reason. It's fast, it's strong, it hits really hard. It's got moves that are great against Koraidon and Calyrex and Flutter Mane. It's got moves that are good against most everything in the meta, and it is a scary threat to play against. Another one, because a lot of these are kind of boring, because it's like, oh, these are Pokemon that have always been in the top 10, but one Pokemon I wanted to talk about, actually maybe two right here. Grimmsnarl's #16, so it's in the top 20, which I don't think was ever the case before. Maybe I'm wrong. Grimmsnarl's another great Pokemon to focus on, you know, really strong and pretty versatile. But this is kind of a funny one, and unsurprisingly, Ditto was nowhere to ever be found in previous Scarlet and Violet formats, and now it is in the top 20 of it's the 17th most used Pokemon. And the reason for that is because of the ability Imposter, which allows it to automatically transform into the enemy when it enters the battlefield. And notably, when you transform with Imposter, or when you transform at all, you copy the enemy's stat boosts. So for Pokemon like Koraidon, who sometimes Swords Dance or Flame Charge, or even something like Rayquaza or Kyurem who like Dragon Dance, you can send in your Ditto and automatically transform into them and copy all those boosts and basically destroy them. And because, as you can see here, Choice Scarf is the most common item on Ditto, because you have a Choice Scarf along with those boosts, you are faster than them, so you can just kill them at that point. Ditto is a Pokemon that has consistently been, you know, very highly used in these meta games where restricted legends are allowed, even in previous generations. That was also the case. So it's just really funny, because again, Ditto was probably like number 500 in the usage statistics for previous seasons, but now all of a sudden it skyrockets to #17. And honestly, just looking at these, a lot of these Pokemon in the top 30, top 40 have been hovering around that, right? Like Pokemon like Rillaboom or Glimmora, these are Pokemon that have been really solid in Battle Stadium singles and still are. So they haven't really changed that much, or I haven't paid too much attention. I guess Primarina is another Pokemon that actually really plummeted. This was a Pokemon that was hanging around the top 10, like top 13 in previous seasons, and it is now at number 37. So Primarina has fallen significantly, which is a little surprising because its typing's really good against Koraidon. Although the funny thing is, even though you resist pretty much all of Koraidon's moves, if you take some early damage with Primarina and they go like Terra Fire with Flare Blitz, they can still do some massive damage to you. So once again, Koraidon is terrifying. Yeah, so that's my kind of winners and losers of this current update. You know, I'll be excited to see how the meta looks by the end of next month, just to see like if anything changes. You know, this is our first month with this format, and so people are still trying things out, maybe entering the new season, which starts pretty soon. Maybe people will have a better idea of what to beat and what to play and stuff, and so maybe things will change pretty drastically. So I'll be keeping up with this. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in this type of content. I do have a battle video recorded, and it's going to come out in hopefully in a couple days, within a couple days as well. I just need to kind of do the voiceover for that. But I'm excited for that. It's a new team with a kind of unconventional restricted legend, so I'm really excited to try that one out. But either way, this is fun. I guess I'll just kind of very briefly talk about kind of the state of the meta. I mean, it's fast-paced. It's scary. Make sure you have a plan for Koraidon and Calyrex and Fluttermane. I think if you have plans for those 3 Pokemon, you'll be in a decent spot. And then as far as your restricted legend, honestly, despite the fact that Koraidon, Calyrex, you know, Miraidon are very, very strong and very highly used, it feels like almost anything can be used. I mean, don't use a restricted that has a better version, if that makes sense. Like, if you want to use Giratina, sadly, I don't think it's going to be good enough because Calyrex is probably just better as a ghost type. But if you want to use like Kyurem Black, for example, it's a strong Pokemon that doesn't have that basically can do things that no other restricted can, if that makes sense, which is just be extremely strong. You know, Rayquaza is versatile and also has access to extreme speed. Lugia is extremely tanky, for example. Like, you know, I think most of these restricted legendary Pokemon are viable, and just try to build around them. And once again, make sure you have an answer for Fluttermane, Calyrex, and Koraidon. Luckily, a lot of answers that you would have for Calyrex can work for Fluttermane. So basically, Pokemon with really high special defense or like normal types and stuff like that, those are good against both of these ghost types. So you can kind of consolidate your answers into like 1, maybe 2 Pokemon for those. And then Koraidon sadly requires a different set of counters than Calyrex, so you need to kind of be prepared for that. But either way, let me know what you think of this meta in the comments. I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are. You know, are you hating it because it's extremely powerful and it's hard to win games, or are you loving it because your favorite Pokemon is Necrozma and you're using it a lot to good success? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.